This is Michael Jackson, Director of Sales.
David McGill, Director of Government Relations and Public Policy.
Do you have an
Russell
opening?
Dimitrenko, Chief Financial Officer.
Sorry, who was that?
Russell Dimitrenko, Chief Financial Officer.
Russell. Thank you. Mr. Aquilina, would you like to make an opening statement for the committee, please?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Senator Pratt. I would like to say something that will take less than 5 minutes. I'll start by saying that everyone at Holden and General Motors, indeed, is hurting as a result of the decision to retire the Holden brand. It's just so sad. Holden has been a family and a livelihood for so many people. And GM explored every conceivable option to secure a strong future for Holden, but it was not to be. Once the decision was made, we set about winding down Holden with dignity and respect. An icon like Holden attracts emotion from everyone, not just us. Our employees, dealers, suppliers, the motorsport community, and many other partners and Australians generally. Holden began in Adelaide in 1856 and has been owned by GM since 1931. It was GM who answered the government's call of the day to start a car industry post-war, launching the first locally made car in 1948. We invested billions over the decades in factories, equipment, R&D, market development here and in the many export countries that we participated in. It spawned a future for new Australians, just like my grandfather. Not long after arriving at Station Pier here in Melbourne, my nonno, as he is known to me, became a toolmaker in experimental and did a range of jobs there for more than 23 years. My family is only here because of Holden. So for me, and like for so many other Australians, this is deeply personal. The broader point is, though, that GM's investments in Australia were a cornerstone for the nation's industrialisation and economic growth that went well beyond the auto sector. And Australia benefited enormously, as Holden did from Australia. Through this inquiry, you'll hear the perspectives of some Holden dealers, for whom Holden provided a platform to generate significant wealth over a long period of time. Sure, there were some bumpy years amongst them, but even as the market fragmented, Holden was a pivot point for our dealers to form new partnerships with other brands. So today, it is a fact, not an excuse, that 90% of our dealers are multi-franchise with highly diversified businesses. And we sincerely thank our dealers and the people who work there with pride over so many years. I have always had the deepest respect for you, and I'm proud of what we have achieved together. I'm pleased to update the committee today that over 90% of our dealers have accepted our transition support package, which incorporates an agreement to continue an ongoing relationship as a network of Holden authorised service outlets that will support our 1.6 million customers out there. The support package was designed to make dealers whole on their lost profit opportunity associated with selling new Holdens for the remaining 2.5 years of our agreement. It has multiple components, most importantly, the opportunity to continue that profitable service and repair work for at least the next 5 years. And we know the overall package puts dealers in a better position than if they were to continue selling Holdens for the next 2.5 years, irrespective of the economic situation that has emerged since that offer. I'd also like to take this opportunity, grateful to all governments which supported not just Holden, but the entire automotive industry. Yes, there were some big numbers involved, all aimed at stimulating and advancing manufacturing and R&D in this country, and it worked, with car companies returning that investment many times over. For example, Holden generated 18 times the $2 billion it received from government programs over the last 2 decades. That's $36 billion worth of activity. $1.8 billion each year buying Australian-made parts. It's a return on an investment. But the world and the market evolved, and like every other local manufacturer, Holden transitioned to importing its vehicles until, of course, GM was confronted with an investment decision that would determine our future. For Holden to prosper, we required unique investment in product, technology and distribution that could not be justified from a market that represents about 1% of global vehicle sales. So very sadly, GM took its decision back in February. I'll close by saying a big thank you to the countless Aussies who have worked with pride at General Motors, at Holden, and to our customers and fans, all without whom we wouldn't have made it this far. Their journeys and memories are the essence of what makes Holden Holden and what made it iconic to Australia. And we'll continue to support our customers for a long time and have no intention of letting them down. So with that, I thank you, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. And indeed, it is a sad time for Holden lovers right around the country, and indeed is a reflection on our national identity as a whole, because Holden has been so much a part of that. Senator O'Neill, would you like to start off with questions?
Yes, I would. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for your opening statement, Mr. Aquilina. I wonder if you could provide that to the Secretariat for us to have a look at. It was a very lyrical introduction, but I want to encourage you to be very careful with the words that you use in your response to my questions this morning. You said at 1% of global vehicle sales, right-hand drive was a very small part of the market, so we made our decision to leave Australia in February. There's a difference between a decision and an announcement, Mr. Aquilina. You made your announcement in February, but I want to get to the heart of the decision. So I ask you to be very truthful in what you say here on the Senate to the Parliament of Australia and the public, who are, as you indicated, very, very aware of a long relationship with Holden. Could you please advise why General Motors decided to retire from Australia as announced on February 17 of this year?
Yeah, so Senator O'Neill, you can be assured of my truthfulness in any answer I give to the committee today, so that shouldn't be a question. But the decision was taken in the days leading up to the announcement on the 17th February 2020.
Can I ask you to be specific about that, Mr. Aquilina? Be specific about the dates. If you're saying the days leading up to the decision was made, please be very, very clear and very careful. I do want to get the facts on the record here, not a spin. Yeah,
I was advised of the decision that was taken overnight my time on Friday, on the Friday leading up to the announcement, and then over the weekend we prepared for that decision. So in the days leading up, we made that decision, and it was a result of GM being confronted, as I outlined at the time, confronted with some decisions it needed to make around some key investments required by General Motors that were bespoke and unique to Holden continuing in the Australian market. And it was, as I said, it was not just around right-hand drive vehicles, although that is a major part of it, but there was investments required in technology, in the customer experience, our distribution, our brand, our marketing going forward. And as I outlined in my opening statement here, 1% of global sales emanate from Australia. Okay. It's a very small market without the scale necessary to recover some of those investments, and unfortunately the decision was taken.
So, Mr. Aquilina, you were advised of a decision, you said, on Friday. What Friday was that? The 13th or something of February, is that correct?
17th, 16th, 15th, 14th. The
14th of February you were advised. At what time were you advised?
Well, I was advised overnight, so it was in the early hours of the morning.
And following that advice of the decision, did you have any input into that decision, Mr. Aquilina, as the representative for General Motors in this area?
Senator O'Neill, I did have an opportunity to provide input in a study that considered a whole range of options. Or as I mentioned earlier, we looked at every conceivable option for Holden.
Okay, let me just get the
dates. I had a role
dates.
to play in each one of those.
I just want to get the dates. When did you feed into the process that ended in the decision of General Motors, which was advised to you on the morning of the 14th of February? When did you start feeding into that process, Mr. Aquilina?
I started feeding into that process in December of 2019.
So did you advise anyone from the AADA that you were engaged in that process in December 2019?
It would not have been appropriate to advise anyone external to us. We were looking at a range of options. Just to put it into context, Senator O'Neill, and I'd like the ability to answer this question in a more fulsome way. What we were looking at the time is the conceivable options available to us to keep Holden going in this country, to not only come up with a plan that had Holden limp along, but rather to thrive and prosper in a market like Australia, which of course is highly competitive.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
It would be
Aquilina.
irresponsible for any business. It would be irresponsible for any business to not consider the full range of options available to them. So I was feeding into the broad range of options for Holden.
So you described a very intimate and supportive relationship in your opening comments, yet you've just told me that you decided not to talk to any representatives of the AADA, even though you were engaged in discussions about the business with GM in the US from December 2019. When you were advised of that final decision of GM to withdraw from Australia on the morning of the 14th, did you contact anyone from the AADA?
No.
Are you sure about that? You did not contact anyone from the AADA after you got the news from General Motors?
I'm absolutely not talking to anyone from the AADA.
So the first communication...
My engagement with...
Mr. Aquilina, can you still hear us?
I've just lost video here. I'm hoping you can hear me.
Yeah, you're back now, so...
You'll need to commence your answer again. Thank you, Mr. Aquilina.
Can you answer the question, Mr. Aquilina?
Are you able to hear us, Mr. Aquilina, and commence your answer again? Mr. Aquilina, we can see you. Are you able to see or hear us? Give us a wave if you can hear us. Other representatives from Holden, are you able to hear us currently? Can you give us a wave if you can hear us?
Yep, I can hear you okay. This is Michael.
And Mr. Aquilina, you're not able to hear us at this moment?
It's David McGill. I can hear you on the phone, but I'm obviously not on video.
Okay, perhaps Mr. Aquilina might need to refresh or dial in. Could I ask Mr. Aquilina? Mr. Aquilina, are you there? Chair, can I indicate that I think we need to get the answers from Mr. Aquilina to
Yes,
this
we will,
question?
I certainly think so too. I'm seeking advice from the Secretariat about how we're able to get him back on line.
And can I...
Sorry, I'm back now.
Oh, great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina.
My apologies.
Neil, do you mind restating your question just to give Mr. Aquilina a moment?
So, Mr. Aquilina, when you were advised on the early morning of the 14th of February 2020 by General Motors that the process you've been engaging with them between December 2019 and that date had delivered a decision to withdraw from Australia, did you contact anyone at the Australian Holden Dealers Council about that decision?
So I thought your original question, Senator O'Neill, was around the AADA, which we didn't have any contact with. Our contact with dealers is not through the AADA, it's with our own dealers and our own council.
Yep.
And yes, so yes, I met with I met with the chair of the Holden Dealer Council on that Friday.
Okay, well that seems appropriate. At least you communicated with the council. So what did you advise the council at that point of time? How would you characterise that meeting?
Well, that meeting was a confidential meeting between myself and the chair of the council, and I don't wish to go into the discussion that took place at that time.
So yeah, I understand that might be the case, but if you engaged with the council on the Friday, why was there no general knowledge until the Tuesday? Surely you would have enabled the AHDC to have conversations with the dealers who've got, you know, billions of dollars at stake.
We advised people, the council more broadly, and the dealer network, our employees, at the same time on the Monday, as soon as we possibly could do that.
So to be clear, when you made the announcement, I believe it was it the Tuesday the 17th?
It's Monday the 17th.
Monday the 17th. So Monday the 17th was the date on which all of these dealers found out, but you engaged with the AHDC prior to that?
I met with who I consider a colleague, who happens to be the chair of the AHDC on the Friday, and we talked about a range of business, but I'm not going to go into that discussion. I gave it was a confidential discussion, and I'll honour the confidentiality of that discussion.
So
what's important, of course, Senator O'Neill, is that as soon as the local leadership team set about executing the decision from General Motors, we quickly announced it to the Australian dealer network, the council, certainly the employees that were all affected by this, and of course let the broader Australian community know of the decision as well.
why didn't you advise Holden dealers and Holden Australia far earlier about this?
Well, we had a decision just taken in the days leading up to our announcement, and we announced it very quickly after the decision was taken. I don't know how much sooner we could have done it. I mean, essentially, we were advised. We implemented we discussed our plans as a local board and a local leadership team, and as soon as we possibly could let the public know about it and let our constituents know about it, we did so, which was the Monday morning that followed.
So reports that GM closed factories in Australia, Korea, the UK, Thailand and South Africa could suggest a very different timeline than what you're putting on the record today, Mr. Aquilina. Indeed, they suggest strategic board directions that involve analysis and could have been made over a very long period of time. Don't you agree that that's the case?
I don't. I mean, in this whole process, I've seen and heard of a number of conspiracy theories leading up to GM's decisions around Australia.
Mr. Aquilina, let's not do the fake news thing. Just give me the dates if you can. That would be helpful.
Well, the dates were this. I've given you the dates. Dates were that we were advised. When we were advised, we told the rest of the community as soon as we possibly could, which was Monday the 17th of February.
Could you inform the committee? Could you inform the committee when the decision was made to close the manufacturing plant in Thailand?
That decision was also taken around the same time, and we advised people at the 17th of February.
Could you give me the dates when that decision was made, Mr. Aquilina?
I can't. I wasn't privy to that discussion. I mean, that is not an area of the business that that falls under my remit, Senator
Did it
O'Neill.
fall
I
under
can
your
only talk to the
predecessor's
Australian.
remit? Did it fall under your predecessor's remit, Mr. Dave Butner?
No. It's a decision around our Thailand operations, which were quite separate and definitely doesn't have an involvement from the Australian team.
But you are General Motors. You are part of the whole network, okay? You're drawing an arbitrary division here, but it's one company. There was a manufacturing plant in Thailand that was sold. It was manufacturing the highest selling vehicle, the Colorado. When was the decision to shut down that manufacturing plant made? Because that's absolutely vital to your supply of cars. You must have known, or your predecessor, Mr. Butner, must have known. And when did you know?
So when we knew a decision was taken on the sale of the Thailand plant, that was in the days leading up to the 17th of February. I can't be specific about the dates on when GM decided to sell that plant in the days leading up to the 17th of February when it was announced in Thailand. But I'll just say this because I just want to put to bed this whole conspiracy that it's been a long-held view from General Motors to unwind our operations right across Southeast Asia and Australia and so forth. In the case, we were producing the highest volume, most popular model, the Colorado, in 3 plants around the world. If for whatever reason there was a shock to supply out of our Thailand plant, we had options to source vehicles from the 2 other plants that we have produced the Colorado. So
They're a long way away from Australia, though. Thailand was the main supplier to Australia, is that correct?
Yeah, Thailand was the identified source plant for Australia, but we also source cars from Mexico. We source cars from the USA, and in days gone by, we've sourced cars from all over the world. And,
Mr. Aquilino, I've got a number of other questions and we've got limited time. Could I ask about the compensation offer that was made to Holden dealers? Could you explain, first of all, the date at which that offer was made?
The date, the specific date, I might have to ask for. It was in the days following the announcement, on the 17th of February, and I don't know if my colleague Michael Jackson can add to a specific date if that would help you.
The actual specifics of the compensation package were announced to dealers on one-on-one meetings through a series of meetings that commenced from the Monday the following week, or perhaps the Tuesday the following week. We had a series of one-on-one meetings with dealers through the next 4 weeks. I think we got to every dealer, certainly before the end of March.
So you are aware that the dealers considered that retrospectively as being picked off one by one, and it was against what they had recommended to the government, that they wanted to be able to have joint negotiations. But nonetheless, you've articulated that as of Monday the 21st, you made offers to dealers in your network. And how much did you offer them?
So the components of our transition support package are well documented. We've supplied that in a lot of detail, but what we sought to do is make dealers whole on the lost profit opportunity associated with selling new cars, new Holdens, and the compensation offer was multifaceted. There was an offer that dealt to on a per vehicle amount around $1,500. There was $1,500 per car for every car that they sold in 2019, multiplied by the 2.5 years remaining in their agreement. There's also an offer to make good on capital investment expended on behalf of on selling new Holden vehicles. We took into account any special circumstances associated with the decision that we needed to comprehend. We also provided dealers with significant liquidation support to help them move on their unsold inventory and inventory in pipeline, which they accepted. And then we also had the offer to to participate in our service and repair network for the next 5 years, so double the term that's remaining on their existing offer. And that just for your benefit represents, that part of the business typically represents about 115% of the overall profit associated with the Holden brand. It's a more lucrative part of the network.
Chair, if I can ask one final question before giving the call to someone else. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
You had a significant package there by the sounds of things. You know, if I was just a general listener, I think, oh, Holden have done a lot of work to get this ready. You were able to cook all that up in the space of 1 week to be able to commence making offers. Is that correct, Mr. Aquilina?
Oh no, it took. It came together very quickly towards the end. But as I mentioned, I participated and provided input on a whole range of options for Holden leading up to the decision.
Right. So you already kind of had something in the plan. You already had a plan in the works. So my question to clarify that was PricewaterhouseCoopers engaged before or after the formula you've just described was determined to work out compensation? At what date did you engage PricewaterhouseCoopers?
I don't have the specific date just to inform me, but it was after we came up with the original compensation offer, and it was obviously responded to, wasn't supported by a number of the dealers at the time, so we did subject it to greater scrutiny. We have asked PricewaterhouseCoopers to do their own analysis at arm's length to see what amount would be considered fair. They came up with a number much lower than the one that we came up with. We stuck with the original offer. So
that is your version of what happened, but it's clear that PricewaterhouseCoopers were engaged by you. You say at arm's length, but you paid their fees, didn't you? You paid for Pricewaterhouse. Yes, of course. So they were working for you, and they did the numbers after you had already delivered your formula and the offer to the dealers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I wonder if there was a nice little retrofit going on there, Mr. Aquilina, but we'll come back to that if I get another turn at questions. Thank you.
I'm not sure what you mean by that, but let's go to the other questions.
Senator McGrath.
Thank you. I just want to confirm something. Just in relation to the compensation formula, was there collaboration or consultation with the Australian Holden Dealer Council in relation to the determination of that formula?
Senator McGrath, good morning. We took the opportunity to develop that formula on the basis of the data and the financial information that was supplied to us by Holden dealers over a number of years. We used that as a basis because we wanted to make them whole on their lost profit opportunity. We looked at their profit made from selling new cars in 2019, and they made a $600 loss for every Holden that they sold. So we went back 3 years to try to find a time when they were in the black, and we came up with, going back by 3 years, a number of $351 per car. We put on the table $1,500 per car. And we thought that would be, we would believe that that would be seen as a generous offer at the time that would be that dealers would accept.
But I suppose my question was there any consultation or collaboration with the Australian Holden Dealers Council? So did General Motors in Australia speak to the AHDC, or did you just rely on the data that you've just mentioned before?
We didn't speak to the AHDC about what their offer, what their amount should be prior to any decision or any announcement. We spoke to the AHDC immediately after the decision was taken. We did inform them. We had come up with, and they were very they at the time were very anxious to hear from us what our compensation offer would be, and can we quickly get that to them, which we undertook to do. We came up with our offer with the analysis that was based on their data, and put it to them. But we asked them what their amount should be, No, we did not.
Okay. So when you had the data and you were looking through it, did you conduct a detailed financial impact on all dealers to see if the compensation was fair and equitable?
Yeah, so we did. We did it on a broad basis by taking a look at, okay, let's look at what position the dealers would be as a result of Holden not being able to supply vehicles for the next 2.5 years, the remainder of their contract with us. And we went into a process, as I explained earlier, that sought to not only make them whole, but even on those losses, but seek to overcompensate so we could identify if there were any other issues that the Holden's exit might have caused, that could actually serve to remedy those as well. So we did take a very deep analysis. We did it in quick time, but it was a very deep analysis to understand what it was that dealers were making from selling new cars. We added into it what they were making from other lines of business that they have associated with selling new cars, like selling finance and insurance, accessories, and any other income from the sale of new cars, and sought to make them whole on that at the very least. In most cases, and we did do that with the $1,500.
So you would assert that your compensation package is fair for all dealers, based on the data that you use to build the compensation package?
Yes, Senator McGrath, we would assert that.
Okay. I've got some more questions there, and hopefully I can come back to that. But I just want to ask just about the Holden brand itself. I'm a little confused. So who was the final decision maker in relation to the retirement of the Holden brand? So I take it wasn't you. Who made the decision?
The decision was taken by the General Motors board and the General Motors senior leadership team in Detroit. My role was to provide as much input as I could on the various scenarios that we were considering for Holden in Australia, including a future which would needed it to attract a significant investment, and of course I had to provide input on how you would conduct an orderly wind down if that's the decision that it took. Unfortunately, that was the decision that it took.
So when did they make the decision?
Well, they made the decision, as I mentioned, in the days leading up to the announcement. So I was advised on this. Yeah,
I'm sorry, but if there's a board making a decision, there is normally a board meeting. When would that? What date did the General Motors board make that decision?
General Motors board and leadership team made that decision overnight. Where I got, as I mentioned in response to Senator O'Neill's question, it would have been overnight, the 13th, 14th of February.
So when you went to America, and there's been some media reports about someone overhearing you talking about the retirement of the Holden brand. In what context was that? Because my understanding was, is that correct that you were in America in late January, and that there would have been discussions then about the retirement of the Holden brand? So
those accounts don't bear much resemblance with my reality. However, I was in Detroit in January, and I was participating, as I mentioned earlier, I was participating in a very broad study on the various options associated with Holden's future. It considered options like what investment it would take to have that brand and have have the cars necessary to thrive in the Australian market, but it also needed to consider what the alternatives were too. So in my time between December and February, until the announcement was taken, was spent working day and night on all of the various possibilities for General Motors operations here in Australia.
So on this flight, because the media reports indicate that there might have been discussions about how to strategise with Holden dealers and employees. Would that be correct as part of your approach?
Look, I don't agree with the account, but what I will say is that at that time I was working on a whole range of scenarios, Senator McGrath. I was participating in a study that considered not only a wind down but a future with Holden. I was obviously hopeful that it was a much longer future with the Holden brand, introducing great new product that met the needs and was superior to the competition well into the future. That would be my plan A, but I had to consider plan B, plan C, plan D and plan E. And that was my job.
I'll need to give the call to Senator Faruqi.
Cool. I won't, just two questions. Just in relation to Mary Barra, who I understand is the President and CEO of General Motors, has she ever visited Australia?
Mary Barra is the CEO of General Motors, and I can't recall Mary visiting Australia.
Okay. Just in relation to what we call the Holden brand, and this may seem a weird question in a way, but who actually owns it? So which legal entity owns the Holden brand? Is it General Motors based in Detroit?
Ultimately, the brand is on a balance sheet in a General Motors company, as a General Motors owned company, and I can't recall exactly what subsidiary of the General Motors company it is, but it is owned by General Motors. Yes.
So you say it's on a balance sheet. Well, what value would the Holden brand have on the balance sheet of General Motors?
Well, that's not something I wish to disclose here in a public setting. It's not the right place to do that. But it is of significant value. It is a value that the dealers who are now becoming authorised service outlets will enjoy deriving value from themselves over the next at least 5 years as they provide service and repair work, and there's certainly other points of value as a result of the Holden brand. That's an asset that we cherish within the company.
Well, I'd probably query that in terms of if it's such an important asset, how most Australians feel how that asset, which you've said should be treated with dignity and respect in your opening statement, has actually been treated in terms of the announcements that's been made this year. I just want to get a reassurance from you in relation to the Holden brand. We've seen MG, a famous British automobile company, is now owned by a Shanghai-based state-owned company in China. Can you give us an assurance that General Motors won't sell off the Holden brand to, for example, a state-owned company in China, or indeed any other company? Can you give us that assurance? I'm not going to
address any hypotheticals, but I want to assure you this, and that is that Holden remains within our ownership, within General Motors ownership. We expect to trade with that trademark and that brand for a long period into the future. It gives our customers, 1.6 million of them, the assurance that they can come to a location bearing that mark, that they will, that they can have their cars looked after appropriately with well-trained technicians and genuine parts. And that's how we intend to utilise that brand into the future.
One final question, Chair. I mean, I wrote to Ms Barra back in May asking for her to sell the Holden brand back to Australia for $1, not because it's worthless, because it's priceless. And I note that Ms Barra has not had the courtesy to reply to my correspondence. So if we face a situation where the CEO of General Motors won't reply to legislators in the Commonwealth Parliament, how can we be assured that what you say to us today about the long-term future of Holden in Australia is actually assured? Aren't you taking us for a ride up the creek?
Senator McGrath, we did receive your correspondence, and only recently, I might add, because it did take a while for your letter to reach Detroit, given the circumstances, and we will be replying to you. But the reply will say this: we genuinely value the Holden brand. It has enormous value to the Australian community. The way that we're conducting ourselves with our heritage vehicles and our icons and the artefacts that are associated with such an important brand only demonstrates how careful we are with something that as I mentioned earlier, it's deeply personal for a lot of people. It's deeply personal for me. And we'll be giving assurance to the extent possible that we wish to continue trading with that brand and caring for it as it deserves to be treated. That's going to be the contents of the response that I've been involved
Senator
with.
Faruqi, you now have the call.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, gentlemen. Thanks for coming in to provide evidence today. I just want to have a couple of questions on the workers that work for GM Holden in Australia, and then I'll move on to other things. Professionals Australia have said in their submission to the inquiry that General Motors had indicated that you won't be following the redundancy process in the EBA, that you won't be offering voluntary separation program provisions because, and I'll quote from the Professionals Australia submission, they believe this to be a waste of time and money. Why do you believe it to be a waste of time and money, and why won't you follow, or why haven't you? I guess it's all happened now. Did you not follow the redundancy process outlined in the EBA?
We absolutely followed the redundancy process in the EBA. It's an involuntary program. It's not a voluntary one at all. There is a wind down of a business that we're navigating here, Senator, and as such, we're following to the letter the EBA provisions here. Now, that matter, I believe, is still before the Fair Work Commission, and it remains before the Fair Work Commission. So it'd be inappropriate for me to comment much beyond that. It's being challenged by Professionals Australia, as is their right to do so. However, we don't agree with their contention, and we'll continue to participate in that resolution process.
Have you helped and supported any of the workers to transition into other work at all?
We're pleased to say that we've seen a great deal, particularly the engineers, sales, marketing staff that have since departed and separated from our company, being snapped up, even in the environment that we're in, by other employers. We've seen a great number go to other OEMs, other car manufacturers, some engineering firms, consulting firms, yeah, I am pleased with how valued our staff have been seen by the market generally, and heartened every day that I see a report back from people that I've worked with over so many years to see them moving on and transitioning to a life without Holden.
Was there any support that Holden provided for them to transition?
Yeah, well, we engage with a number of prospective employers. The outreach from a lot of employers, alternative employers, was quite heartening, and we also knocked on a number of doors on their behalf too to see and identify that. As part of the separation from Holden, every employee also received a transition support offering. They received financial advice up to an amount, and it's been in many ways actually, Senator, whilst that was on offer for everyone to take up voluntarily, the take up actually has been rather minimal because a lot of our staff have managed to find employment elsewhere quite easily, much easier than what we would have expected.
Okay. Could you just provide on notice just how many of those staff have found employment, if you have the numbers, and how many didn't take up the package? Just moving on to a submission that it's submission 12 made by an engineer who was employed at GM Holden. And in this submission, they say that in 2018, the General Motors president was in Australia and said that there was a plan to hire 150 additional engineers to work on General Motors development projects. Do you know if this plan went ahead?
Yes, so Senator Faricki, you're referring to, well, that submission is referring to a visit by some very senior General Motors leaders who came in and announced a new program. It was a program that we kicked off and employed a number of people, I believe at least 50% of the 150 that were identified at that time. Those people were employed on and continued working on that project right up until the end of June this year. In fact, we still have a number of those people continuing work in our proving ground and expect to be winding up that project at the end of August. We may not have got to the 150 that was announced because other things had happened and evolved since that announcement, but we certainly launched into a lot of those projects that were announced at the time.
Yeah, it seems to me when there were plans of expanding and doing more projects and hiring 150 people so in 2018, you had no idea that a year on or a year and a bit on, you would be absolutely winding up operations in Australia. It seems a bit strange to me, I have to say.
Yeah, it's absolutely the case. And what you say is that what I'd point out to all of the people and those who might mischievously suggest that Holden or General Motors had a cunning plan to exit this country. I mean, in 2018, we had just struck new dealer agreement, or recently before that struck new dealer agreements, 5 years of length. We had introduced a new finance company into the market. We'd kicked off these new engineering projects. We'd introduced new programs that were first for Holdens. We introduced new products that we committed a significant right-hand drive investment to. To think that we'll do all that and then turn around whilst having a plan to wind up our operation it just defies any logic whatsoever, and it's just a big red herring.
In the same submission that I just referred to, submission 12, there are also claims that staff were completely in the dark about the plans to wrap up. But that submission also tells a story of how 8 new engineers had commenced work on the day that General Motors Holden announced the shutdown. Now, is that true?
It may well be true. I don't know. It's likely. I mean, we were bringing on right up until.
So,
well, as I mentioned, I mean, this was only a decision taken days beforehand. So it's and we went and sought to announce it as soon as we knew. We were bringing on staff to achieve what we wanted to achieve as a company, the projects that we needed to implement. So it wasn't some organised wind down up until that point. It was far from it. We were advised of the decision. We announced it straight away, and there were some unfortunate coincidences associated with that, which unfortunately affected those people. And it's a dreadful thing to have to tell people that their jobs are coming to an end, and it's a dreadful thing to do it to young, hopeful engineers who are just coming onto our books at around the same time as we're announcing it. It wasn't a pleasant experience whatsoever.
Yeah, and what was the rush in closing down? Like, it seems to me that everyone was blindsided, left in the dark, and people, just because of that, it's unfair for all those people. What was the rush?
Well, the alternative we would have been accused, as we have, even though it wasn't true, of not telling people and not being upfront. And we take our responsibilities as a corporate citizen very seriously.
I'm not talking about the rush in telling people, but the rush in winding down.
Oh, in winding it down. So, we were coming to a point, as I mentioned earlier, where we had to make some decisions on whether to introduce new products, continue investing in programs. If we were to tell people, for example, that we were going to wind down the Holden brand and not do it for several years, we would have seen such a deterioration and poor returns for everyone involved. It would have been a much worse situation than telling people and doing it swiftly. We did it to mitigate losses for everyone involved.
So one last question from me, Chair. In the ACCC submission to the inquiry, they say that GM has stated publicly that it will provide servicing and spare parts for at least 10 years. However, depending on the particular circumstances, this may not be enough to comply with the guarantee as to repair facilities and spare parts. So I'm just wondering, what is your response to that, and how can your customers be better looked after?
Well, I think many customers have been reassured by the commitment we made at the time that we announced to continue to meet our obligations to keep their cars on the road, continuous supply of parts for at least 10 years. 10 years gives the people a lot of comfort. It's well beyond the ownership cycle, even numerous ownership cycles of that one particular vehicle. And typically there are opportunities to continue to provide parts well beyond that if that is the case. Now, if we've said this and we'll say it proudly, we will continue to support our customers for a long time. What that timing is, well, it's at least beyond 10 years. And we have no intention of letting them down. And we have no intention of not living up to our obligations. We'll do the right thing.
Thanks.
Senator Farrell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'd like to, preface my questions by a comment about Senator McGrath's letter to the CEO. I think it's rather ingenuous of the Liberal Party to be sending letters to General Motors calling on them to keep the Holden name in Australia when it was their government that basically ran the company out of Australia when they failed to respond to reasonable requests by General Motors for assistance like just about every other government in the world gives their companies. And I've seen firsthand the terrible consequences in South Australia's north of the result of that decision. And I just think Senator McGrath is being very disingenuous when he says, look, why aren't you keeping the name in Australia? And I have to say I have great sympathy for the company and the workers when that decision was made by former Prime Minister Abbott and Treasurer Joe Hockey. I think it was a complete abrogation of our commitment to Australian manufacturing. However,
do you have a question, Senator?
I do. Yes, I do.
I'm chairing. Thank you, Senator McGrath.
Yes, and I'll respond to your. In future, I'll respond to your directions, Chair, rather than those of Senator McGrath. Mr. Aquilina, there's been some comment publicly about the company's attitude towards the negotiations with the dealers, and in particular a variety of reports that the negotiations or the mediation that was supposed to take place in June was not done in good faith by General Motors. What do you say to that claim?
Well, I reject that, and there's been a lot of assertions and theories and twisting of facts levelled at Holden or General Motors, Senator. We put an offer before the dealers goes back to February to transition from selling Holden vehicles to a future without that, with a service and repair network. We provided information. We engaged several times. They formed a group and sought their counsel. They threatened litigation from the very outset. We participated in and responded to requests made by them to participate in discussions along the way. We participated in the mediation process, where just because they weren't able to persuade us that our offer was not only fair but indeed on the generous side, and just because that they didn't believe it to be fair and wanted more, they characterised us as not acting in good faith, and I just reject that assertion. And we had, in that time frame, Senator. Since we originally made the offer, we were asked to extend timelines, which we did. We had an economic situation arise, and which only deteriorated the future outlook for Holden dealers. Yet we held our offer firm during that time, and we did not reduce it. We kept it going at the levels that we originally put forward. I think that speaks of a company that acted in extraordinarily good faith, participated in all the discussions that were asked, that we were requested to. We gave people every opportunity to identify any issues through the process, and through they had white glove service from their dealer transition managers. It was a respectful and process right along the way, and I just don't think that their characterisation of our behaviours.
Well, I guess one characterisation, as you call it, for failure to negotiate in good faith would have been to agree to a mediation process. And I guess if your offer was as good as you say it was or is, then you'd have had nothing to fear by that process, and I guess might have assuaged some of the concerns of the dealers in that process. Is there a reason why you didn't agree to the arbitration process?
Yeah, so Senator, just to clarify, we participated in the mediation process in around the middle of June.
So one of I suppose my suggestion is, just to be clear, and it's a bit hard to do this over the phone when I'm not sort of present in the room, but I've asked you the question as to why people have said you didn't negotiate in good faith, and you've answered that question. What the proposition I'm putting to you is that a sign of good faith bargaining might have been for you to agree to the arbitration process, which was then proposed. And if your offer was as good as what you claimed it to be, then one would have thought you'd have no fear in an arbitration process, and it might have, resolved the issues behind closed doors, protected the good name of Holden and GM in Australia, and we wouldn't be holding this hearing. What do you say to that proposition?
Well, I'll say several things. Firstly, this hearing and this inquiry was announced well before any dispute arose, and this was always going to happen. And we welcome it because, unfortunately, through the course of a dispute, a lot of things are said, a lot of propositions are made, and we have an opportunity here to at least address some of those. To the question around and the proposition around our offer standing scrutiny. Well, there were numerous discussions with individual dealers, with dealers who had representation from their own council, from a mediation process, and in the end, arbitration was indeed suggested in the final days leading up to a time when we said we needed to know an answer from Holden dealers as to which way they would like to go with this. And in those final days, we had an indication from a wide variety, a vast number of dealers saying that they were going to sign up. So it wasn't appropriate to then launch into an arbitration process in the final days of this dispute, when there were some parties who were not satisfied with it and wanting to push for that. In the end, we allowed the time to elapse. 90% of Holden dealers have now signed up to the transition support program, to the extent that, I'm confident that a good reason for that is it just might be possible that offer was indeed fair, and that dealers were very keen to move on and transition to a life without selling new Holden vehicles and accept our offer to do so.
Well, to that point, it's been suggested by some of these dealers that the offer you made, and perhaps the reason why as many of the dealers who have signed up have done so, was because you indicated to them it was a take it or leave it offer, and if they didn't take it, well, then they'd see you in court. Is that true?
No, it's not accurate. It's what we did do is we sought to, we originally identified a compensation model here, we sought to make it not only fair, but on the generous side. Whenever we were confronted with decisions along the journey, we erred on the side of generosity. We believe that to be the case. It had been subjected to scrutiny over a 4.5 month period now, and no one could persuade us that the offer was anything but fair. So we put it on the table. We said, indeed, in the end, we need to understand where the dealers sit with this. We need to understand if you're agreeing to transition to becoming an authorised service outlet, because if you chose not to, we needed to start working on an alternative arrangement to support our 1.6 million customers. So at that time, just because we didn't increase our offer and increased the amount through a process of dispute, doesn't mean it wasn't fundamentally fair. In the end, 90% of the dealers have signed up to our transition support package, and many are thankful to have that transition. And dealers are not Holden dealers are not a homogenous group. There are very differing views amongst them. You're hearing from representations of some Holden dealers, but there are also a number of Holden dealers who are thankful and have extended the hand of friendship to us, and so they're glad that the transition process is over with. Now we can get on with casting our new future, and that is together with an ongoing relationship, most gratefully.
Chair, can I ask one quick question? Mr. Aquilina, did you attend the mediation?
I did.
You did? Or you did not?
Yes, I did.
You did?
Oh, I did, yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Aquilina, if the mediation was so good, why did we receive this submission this morning? The impact of Holden's decision to withdraw the brand is devastating. I've spoken to numerous dealers who are suffering anxiety, and there are even more under considerable financial stress, experiencing mental health issues and family issues. There are dealers that I believe will lose everything: their business, their home, possibly their marriage. Mr. Aquilina, if that is the submission to this committee by a number of Holden dealers, I find it hard to understand how you can sit here and defend the sudden withdrawal of General Motors from Australia.
Well, as I mentioned, Senator O'Neill, I mean, we're all sad and quite devastated ourselves by that decision, and our job was to go about putting forward a fair outcome to Holden dealers. We believe it is fair because we believe that if Holden was allowed to continue and dealerships were allowed to continue selling cars for the next 2.5 years of their agreement, they would be in a much worse off position than what the compensation and transition support package actually puts them into. We're seeing a state of an industry which was in decline before before we saw the impact of a pandemic and economic harm put further strain on this industry. Within that, Holden dealers which 90% of them are multi-franchise, and Holden represents around 29-30% of the Holden dealerships business. Because of that, even their diversified business is going to have to, unfortunately, adapt to an economic situation which goes well beyond Holden's decision. And what we chose to do is put forward a compensation package which not only makes them whole on the losses associated with it, but hopefully gives them enough headroom to be able to adjust to all of the circumstances that are prevailing. I'd like to say that it's not lost on us, by the way, that the emotional impact on a whole range of people is emotional impact for a lot of people at Holden too. And we extended from day one the opportunity for our Holden dealers to access our counselling services and everything at our cost to help guide them through this.
Senators, I know you have a lot more questions, but unfortunately we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you to representatives of General Motors for your attendance this morning. It's going to take a couple of minutes for our next witnesses to get online. If you're able to, you're more than welcome to listen in online after you've disconnected from the video conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators. Bye for now.
Thank you.